to do. And I was like, like, stay focused, Jamie, this is on film. And I thought to myself, fucking hell, so we started talking about Nietzsche, right? He loves to rant on Nietzsche, I had written a bit about it. Everybody knows that quote, God is dead. But what most people don't know is the rest of the paragraph in Thus Spake Zarathustra, which is actually, be careful when you kill your gods. Because when you kill your gods, you rip out the morality and the ethics and everything that is good and true about your society. Don't think that people just love their neighbors for the fuck of it, right? Be careful when you kill your gods. But at the same time, I'm working on this next book. He was about to release his most recent one, Who Wrestle With God. And he started launching into all of these Old Testament stories. And I was like, man, why, out of all of the things to pick these days, are you choosing a wrathful and vengeful Old Testament desert God and not the Sermon on the Mount? Why are we dealing with slinging lightning bolts and submitting to patriarchal authority and not turning the other cheek and not loving thy enemy as thyself? And so that was really my come to Jesus moment. I'm like, dude, we've been playing small. And if we don't step into this conversation about where our future goes and what stories animate us and guide us, we are ceding the lane to right-wing ethno-nationalists. And the Western legacy, for those of you that are familiar with the ARC conference, which just happened in London, Jordan was a co-founder, as well as the who's who of heterodox to right-wing thinkers with it. This happened just in February. And their whole thing was tub thumping for the Western legacy, as if everybody progressive has no stake in this, and as if they get to define the last word and how we animate the moderate middle. So this is my sort of, I suppose, sticking my neck out on Easter weekend. I was like, if I don't do it now, I'm never going to. So here we are. You're welcome. This is going to be a story in 3 parts. All right, so the first, and this actually comes from a religious debate. It was actually a sold-out show in Austin just about 6 weeks ago, hosted by Barry Weiss of the Free Press, Ayan Hirsi Ali, who is Neil Ferguson's wife. She teaches at the Hoover Institute. She's very well known in European circles. She was raised Somali Muslim Brotherhood, became an atheist, served in Dutch Parliament, and then just 18 months ago maybe, tweeted out that she'd become Christian. And she and Ross Douthat, who's the New York Times Catholic columnist, were in the for column, and then there were a couple of fun and interesting atheists on the against column. They did a full nerdy formal debate, pros and cons and speaking minutes and the whole bit. But this was their question: does the West need a religious revival? So let's take a look at that, because this was Buckminster Fuller years ago. I mean, I think he might have written this in the 30s or the 40s. So just think about this quite clearly. Our task is predominantly metaphysical, for it's how to get all of humanity to educate itself swiftly enough to generate spontaneous social behaviors that will avoid extinction. So prescient back then, still quite a bit of wiggle room. TED hadn't even been invented yet, right? We can make the world a better place. And Bucky was already nailing it. So this is our metaphysical challenge. Because if you haven't been keeping track, and I reckon you probably have, what's so confusing about our current moment is that things are getting exponentially better and exponentially worse at precisely the same time. Physics can't even solve a 3-body problem, right? And we've got 8 billion bodies, all with pesky egos and minds of our own. So how on earth do we do this thing? And it's not just that we are in an accelerating polycrisis, we are also in the midst of a meaning crisis. And we had establishment religion, is pillar 1, holding up the roof of the Western liberal consensus. And we had pillar number 2, right? Modern liberalism, NGOs, UN, governments, democracies, academia, right? And if they were teetering, COVID just put 2 bullets in the remainder, plus podcasts, plus TikTok. So the roof is caved in. on a shared reality. And, you know, Aristotle once said, he said, nature abhors a vacuum, but so does culture. And in that giant sucking sound, people are getting ripped out of the middle to one side or the other, to nihilism or fundamentalism. Nihilism results in a couple of things. It either results in the diseases of despair, you know, depression, anxiety, hypermedication, suicide, checkout, or the subset, hedonism, fuck it, let's just send it. Right? All the kids on ketamine around, bouncing around UK pubs, that kind of a thing. Or fundamentalism. Tee-hee-hee, I heard from the back row, right? just a little bump, just to see how that feels, all right? Yeah. And the fundamentalism, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to be religious fundamentalism. It could be paleo-veganism. It could be anything with certainty to offset the chaos. And of course, at the same time, right, we're seeing this notion of it's not just shelter from the storm, it's shelter from the superstorm, it's shelter from the polycrisis. And I would say that even in the last 6 to 18 months, we're seeing a massive, massive upswing, even though religion and like the Pew Research Center and all the kind of normal demographic analyses have been showing a steady decline in religiosity. What we're seeing right now, and you could make a case that the polycrisis is the rocket fuel behind this movement, is a return not to mainline Protestantism, but a return to increasingly intense and extreme variations and expressions of Christianity, from Eastern Orthodoxy to Opus Dei, like pre-Vatican II Catholicism, to absolutely intense versions of evangelicalism and Pentecostalism. So we are seeing this movement. It is happening right now, and you know, it becomes a deeply significant cultural factor. I'm going to explain this as we go. So in this movement, right, what is drawing people? Well, what's drawing people is the unfolding of rapture ideology. I centered my last book on this notion, this whole idea of recapturing the rapture. Like, why should the wingnuts have the last word on how this all goes down? Right? So the idea here is that, number one, there's 4 steps to this. The world is broken and unsalvageable. Number 2, there's an inflection point or a bottleneck. There's something coming and we can see it from here. Number 3, on the other side of that inflection point, our people, us, we come up roses. So, ergo, vis-a-vis, let's pin it. Get there as fast as possible, never mind the skid marks or the collateral damage. Now, at the time I wrote this book, I laid out fundamentalist religious rapture ideologies. That's fairly straightforward. Most of us can imagine it, even if we haven't sort of been a part of it. But then I also drew the connection to Silicon Valley. And I said, look, they might be wearing Patagonia vests and hoodies. They might be talking about apps and driving Teslas. But actually, whether it's uploading their consciousness to computers, indefinite life extension, or fucking off to Mars, right? All of them are actually sharing a similar deep structure of a rapture ideology. Now that was fairly edgy at the time. I even wiggled in, I said, hey, Atlas Shrugged is in space. That's where all the geniuses are going off to build their thing. It got me uninvited to all the cool kids parties by the Brothers Musk. I spent several years in the dog box for that one, right? But I didn't think in a month of Sundays that what we were going to see was the merging of the two. And in the last 6 months, that's where we are. This is from a Vanity Fair article. This is Peter Thiel in the center. What we are now seeing in Silicon Valley is a complete turn away from social justice arch progressivism that has basically cannibalized itself or left to middle managers and employees. And we are seeing a complete pivot to techno-theofascism. And Peter Thiel is the Cardinal Richelieu of the bunch. He is fundamentally the mafia don of the PayPal mafia, right? The guys who all made their early bones in PayPal and have sprung up everything since, including Elon. And he has been an evangelical Christian for quite some time. The current CEO of Y Combinator, the blog largest tech incubator, is also part of this community. As are these three. There's so many. This would be an entire talk in and of itself. But just to point out three, right, that are very, very active right now. Clearview AI is doing facial surveillance tech, including sentiment analysis. So not only are you being scanned at any protest you're at, instantly identified, but you are being identified as to your feelings towards the president. Your political orientations are being tracked with biometrics. Right, that is now pervasive, and they are far in the tank for this. And Wheal, of course, these guys love Lord of the Rings, so they all name their companies after Lord of the Rings things, right? Which is ludicrous. Their motto for Palantir is protect the Shire. I'm like, who are you fucking kidding? You're releasing this to Sauron. Like, come on. So, and Wheal, right? And Wheal is good old little Palmer Luckey, the guy who made Oculus Rift. I actually ended up camping with him at an event before he even sold it. I was like, what do you do? He's like, I'm doing headsets and VR. I'm like, cool, you go, kid. And like 2 years later, I see him in the papers. And Wheal is doing AI weaponized drone swarms for ICE, for customs, and for straight up battle. And Palantir, they take the claim, folks we know inside the SEAL community contest this a bit, but they take the claim that it was their back-end intelligence analysis that got Osama bin Laden, right? And they full Minority Report, future crime predicting who does what when, based on your entire digital exhaust and analysis. So for all the folks in America that voted for Donald Trump, Elon, and Bobby Kennedy to prevent the New World Order that was being deviously engineered by Kamala and Sleepy Joe, you're like, fuck, guys, we're getting exactly what you said you were afraid of 1,000 times faster by putting this law in power. So the MAGA faithful, right, the red hats in middle America who like to binge watch Yellowstone and drink their Budweisers, right? They are just patsies in this hybrid unholy alliance. And they will be moved because they will be speaking the vernacular, the mimetic deep structures of white Protestant Christianity. And they will be putty in the hands of this law. So that's the stakes. And that's actually that was the kick in the ass, right? Other than getting mansplained by Jordan last summer. This was the kick in the ass for me to come here and talk to you guys. So there's an option, right? And this is our option. What if we could fill what Blaise Pascal so poignantly called that God-shaped hole in our hearts? What if we could fill it with something other than that? Something different than that? Something better than that? Something more good, true, and beautiful than that? Right? Can we do that? And can we revive the Western mysteries? Can we shake off, which is true for so many folks in the progressive world, our ambivalence, our deep ambivalence about the Western legacy? Right? And we can say, it's ours. And if we don't articulate the better, kinder, truer version, other folks will. Because here's a little thing, right? If you think about the Eleusinian mysteries in the Greek tradition, right? It starts with Pythagoras, he's barely written about, but it's not, everyone's like, oh yeah, like a squared plus b squared. Like, no, man. Pythagoras was a mystic baller. Music of the spheres, realm of ideal solids. They were doing the academy, they were doing symposia, they were doing the whole bit ages ago. Socrates picks it up, Plato's like, yeah, man, we've got the cave, we've got the matrix, step out of the cave, you'll see super shit, cool shit, you'll come back, no one will understand you, realm of ideal forms. You get to Aristotle maybe told his Kaikion. He's like, the only thing that's true is when I can hold right in front of me 5 senses, it's a hop and a skip to fucking Cartesian dualistic materialism, and that was the lobotomized Western mystery school. Paul, try hard, pick me Paul, never even saw Jesus. He's wandering around, total dickhead tax collector, has his epiphany right on the road to Damascus. He's like, I'm born again. The early Gnostic homie, we're Peter's crew. You didn't even fucking know the dude. You were making this shit up. But he was an officious little prick. And he took over the whole thing and was like the first century Gnostics, right? Women were priests, sexuality was a part of their rites. They used to throw down in the catacombs. Right? Paul was like, oh, never mind that. Right? Stack them deep, sell them cheap, let them in, Jews and Gentiles, pass the collection plate. We're going to build a thing. So we could have had the Platonic mysteries and Gnostic Christianity, and we got materialist bureaucracy instead. So this is ours to reclaim. And if you're grooving on that symbol, by the way, I was trying to get something done with ChatGPT. And by the way, anybody know what this symbol is at least suggestive of? Caduceus, yes, but it is not the medical symbol. This got bastardized. This is actually Hermes. This is an alchemical symbol. The actual medical symbol is the rod of Asclepius. It got mistranslated in World War I by US Army, who then gave it the twin serpents. These twin serpents and this suggestion would be an integration of the Hellenic mysteries and Gnostic Christianity, right, with the horns of the stag. So this is kind of how we can reintegrate, right, Celtic, Druidic, pagan roots of our Western tradition with these two strands. So think about that. The Greek traditions, demos, rule of the people by the people, unified by gnosis, the shared realization of that which is, connected to Christos, the embodiment of the Christ archetype. Could we do that? And what would that look like for us? And bonus, rather than having to ape other people's traditions, rather than having to do the last unforgivable sin of late-stage capitalism and neo-colonialism, and go back to all of those indigenous cultures that have somehow survived the last 500 years of us, and be like, oh, by the way, we want to steal your rattles and your feathers and your rituals, because we are out of fucking ideas. And you get rid of this law. Once and for all. And this, by the way, is what happens when you cancel Burning Man for 2 years straight. Right? So, you know, nice work if you can get it, but potentially easier than it sounds. There are at least four. I mean, there's a myriad of challenges to this, but there are four that I laid out that I'd love to talk about. And the first is, anybody here a recovering Christian? Anybody grew up within the faith in some way? Catholicism, Judaism, evangelicalism? Yeah. The nuns, the ones with the black habits, scare the shit out of the nuns, as in the spiritual but not religious. None of the above. And the priests are not any better. So we know that there is an allergic reaction, right, to Orthodox established Christianity. But there is also this problem, and this one really, for me at least, sticks in my craw, which is this requirement, and this is C.S. Lewis's. C.S. Lewis was a convert, by the way. If you didn't know the backstory, he and J.R.R. Tolkien were at Oxford. They were part of a group called the Inklings, and they used to get together and talk about all sorts of things. And it was Tolkien, who was a devout Catholic, who actually persuaded C.S. Lewis to embrace Christianity. And then he hated Narnia. So Tolkien was like, dude, seriously? Aslan, you got M. Lion that gets killed, and then you got Father Christmas and Narnia. It's a little too on the nose, and your world building is really kind of weak sauce. But nonetheless, C.S. Lewis has kind of become the intelligent person, the thinking person's Christian. Right? And he said Christianity makes one very clear and outrageous claim, that Jesus of Nazareth was the only Son of God, who died for our sins, was resurrected, and saved humanity with his blood. And this is the one crucial fact of all time. And you think, well, is it? Are you sure? Because the reality are, the more you study the history of Christianity, the evolution of theological thought, this is an aberration. And this is one of those mind fucks where people are in that meaning crisis. They're torn between nihilism and fundamentalism. We're yearning for community. And churches are offering community. They're offering connection. And people come there and they're like, oh, Jesus, God, I have to accept Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior. He died for our sins, he was resurrected. This is Saturday, by the way, of Easter Sunday. This is the day he is in the ground. This is Joseph Campbell's belly of the whale, right? Old back of the stone. We don't know what happens today. Sunday, tomorrow, this all gets resolved. But why do we have to swallow that particular fish story? And the reality is that fundamentalist Christianity is an incredibly recent construction, and it springs out of the early 1900s. If anybody's heard of the Scopes monkey trial, right, it's the famous one about evolution in Tennessee. William Jennings Bryan was he was the defendant, or actually the accuser. He was the one saying actually evolution should be banned in schools. And he was one of the architects of fundamentalist Protestant Christianity in America, which then rippled around the world via missionary movements. It wasn't the case in the basically post-Reformation until that point. They were like, hey, Thomas Jefferson, for instance, took all the miracles and all the wacky shit out of the Bible, cut it all out as a Jeffersonian Bible that then became something known as red letter Christianity, which focused just on the teachings and philosophies of Jesus. There's 1,000 different ways to come into this, except that, and interestingly, this is just a nerd supercut, that fundamentalist movement was actually an aftershock of the American Civil War. The North was mainline, fundamentally C of E, transplanted into Episcopalianism, Methodism, Lutheranism, and that became associated with the North. So basically, post-Protestant Reformation Christianity, the kind of more rational, reasonable, philosophical take, became associated with the North, and fundamentalists doubled down no matter what and believed some whack-ass shit became the holdout of the defeated Confederacy. So needless to say, what we're experiencing politically in America right now is the aftershock of that aftershock. So it's kind of crazy. And then this one's on us. So the first couple were about conservatives and their holding space, right? This one is the challenge, if you ever have thought of trying to set up a church with a bunch of psychedelic progressives. And what starts out as a simple, fairly sweet idea becomes an endless grab bag of bolt-ons and mush, because we're like, well, it's all just one thing, man. I'm not really comfortable with like limiting it, you know? Like, I think we also need to include Gaia, we also need to include Sophia, and then like, what about these other gods? And what are these? I mean, I personally feel that like Earth Mother Wisdom is the thing, and indigenous stuff, and after like 2 weeks of passing the talking stick, you're exactly fucking nowhere, and no one cares. Because if you're trying to be all things to everyone, you are no thing to anyone. You have to pick a lane. We have to pick a lane. Right? I think, was it Picasso who said that art is the line that reveals the truth? You could say the same in religion. So for anybody who has smoked the toad and ridden the rocket, right, to the nose cone of scintillating white light Godhead, you're like, yep, more or less. But try putting that on a bumper sticker, it comes out as a cliche. We are all one, there is only love. You're like, nice, but inadequate to provide cultural frameworks, right? And in fact, it was JFK, right? JFK said, he said, look, he was speaking in England, and he said that you sent all your convicts to Australia and all your fanatics to America, and it's too early to tell who got the worst end of the deal. Right? But I think that right around now, right around 2025, we're starting to shake that out. I encourage Sydney and Byron Bay. And for folks that are part of this community, you might be like, oh, organized religion is, it has been, what's it? Like, we've moved beyond that, we've evolved, and we're thinking, hey, we can do these things elsewhere, we can do these things therapeutically. I would just propose that the medical model that Max and so many wonderful researchers, part of this community and elsewhere in the world, have been pursuing is fantastic, and I wish you all the absolute best. But we've made a deal with the devil. We have poured it into the medical, pharmaceutical, venture capital container, and we will get Prozac Nation 2.0 with new improved 5-HT2A receptor sites. That is where it's going. It is inevitable. And for those of you that were here for Rick's talk on Friday afternoon, there was a lot of really inspiring stuff that Maps is doing, getting back on their feet, pivoting, making these adjustments. But there was one that turned my blood cold. There was the Somaliland stuff, it was fantastic. There was work for Ukraine, there was working with trauma victims in Sarajevo, all sorts of places. Basically women and children and non-combatants who had been on the sharp end, right, of atrocities. But somewhere towards the end, Rick just mentioned, and we're now starting to work with active duty undercover combatants in Israel, and you're like, what the fuck? Are we talking about IDF Special Forces kill squads? Active duty? Experiencing moral harm? And we're just going to wipe their consciences with Soma? So they can get back in action? And Lycos is just now closed without Antonio Gracias. New infusion of $100 million again. God bless them and wish them all the best in working this out. But if you don't know who Antonio Gracias is, he is the right-hand man of Elon Musk. He is, right now, underneath the entire hood of the United States IRS system, the entire database of all the private citizens' data of everyone in the country, and they are looking to install, guess what, and wait for it, Palantir for the entire back end of the US IRS. Same guy now has the keys to Lycos. So where does this go, kids? And I was doing a fireside chat actually with Bruce, who many of you just saw, and Rick at South by Southwest, the tech festival in Austin just last month. And Rick, being a wonderful, open-hearted guy, was like, hey, the FDA, lots of these for-profit companies are looking to just kind of cut out the middleman. They're looking to just do medical only, no therapy. But we all know, right, that therapists are the key. They are the magic. They are the thing that makes the difference in this entire working model of no net trauma by 2070. And I just didn't have the heart to tell him. I'd been at a private gathering the night before hosted by Neuralink, another Elon company, and the CEO of MindBloom, if anybody knows that organization, is the only profitable ketamine clinic in North America. They have done 40,000 sessions, and his talk, and again this was sort of off the record at a garden party, but his talk was about how they were taking 40,000 patient reports, 40,000 clinicians' reviews, and scraping the Facebook groups and WhatsApp threads of every other group integration crew, so like a bunch of patients getting together and process and support each other afterwards, scraping the lot of it, slamming it into AI, and creating Uber AI therapist. So I didn't mean that as a pun. Now we're talking about robo-taxis. Uber was saying, hey guys, you can make your own hours. Hey guys, you can be an independent entrepreneur. Just download the app and drive for us. It's ooby groovy, and we're going to plow every single dollar. We're not going to tell you this into robo-taxis, at which point you will be utterly fucking obsolete. And the same thing is going to be happening for psychedelic therapists who have spent years training, waiting for legalization, and by the time it gets here, 99 out of 100 business models will not include them. Because there will be 24/7 AI therapists trained on your own scraped data to do it almost as well, but a fuck ton cheaper, and no HR. So that's where we are. The last one, it does get more hopeful, I promise. And the last one, this one kind of occurred to me. This is Rupert Murdoch, Inc. We have entered an era, and this is, by the way, I get that this is aesthetically and even psycho-spiritually antithetical to everything we hold to be dear. That the world is vast, there's nuance, there's complexity, there's infinitudes of perspectives to take, but if you have not collapsed your storytelling into a Manichaean battle of light versus dark, your efforts to persuade are going to be steamrolled by the people that are slinging these kind of names. We are in an era of Manichaean memetics. So this is back to the curse of the clever, right? If it's not us versus them, and basically after oxytocin bonds mother to child, right, and crowd to crowd, us versus them, right, everything else is elective and fragile. So put simply, the last neurochemically, developmentally required stage is tribalism. Humanism is optional, right? So let's just talk about this. This is based on Kurt Vonnegut's work, if folks are familiar with Kurt Vonnegut as an author. He did his grad work at the University of Chicago, and he actually came out with a very fun thing about the shape of stories. Like, stories actually have shapes. And he goes, there's the obvious ones. There's the myth of progress, the down, then up. We started out in caves, we end up with smartphones and electric scooters. Yay, right? There's the up, then down. That's East of Eden. We started out naked and grooving in paradise, got kicked out, and in fact, we're tits up tits. Right? And there's the up, there's the boy meets girl. There's it starts out with a meet cute, they get separated and isolated from each other for stupidly contrived reasons, and then they get married in the end. So that's up, then down, then up again. But he said there's one story shape that is the most persuasive of all, and that's the Cinderella story. So she starts out sweeping ashes, crummy stepmothers and sisters, right? Peak. Whoops, what did I just do? You guys are looking at the wrong one. There we go. The peak, right? Pumpkin coach, the wonderful ball, fantastic. Then, absolutely worse than ever. Loses the slipper, stagecoach back to pumpkin. All is loster than lost. Until finally the greatest happy ever after, ever. But then he just slipped something in. He said, you know what? That Cinderella story shows exactly the same shape as the New Testament. Kicked out of East of Eden, bite of the apple, right? All the way to the best thing ever. Unto us a child is born, and to us a star is given, the Nativity. Good Friday, shabam, worst of all, to redemption and the second coming. So that is our deepest mimetic structure. That is a story we can either spend 100 years and $10 trillion trying to come up with something better, or we use it to our advantage, and we start skinning our tails in that way. All right, I have received a little yellow sign down there saying that I have 1 minute. We are at part 2 of 3. Are you guys with me? Can we be a little rebellious? All right. So what is it like if we turn that one simple and outrageous fact that you have to swallow the fish story or nothing, and we actually turn it into a rational mysticism? And a rational mysticism can be experimental. Here's the protocol: conduct the experiment. Experiential. I see what I see and I know what I know for myself. And create an agnostic Gnosticism. Gnosticism, I have seen the light. I have experienced an embodied, felt sense of the suchness of things. And at the same time, agnostic. Fuck if I know. Right? Can we strip out the mythologies, the hand-me-down just-so stories, but keep the psychotechnologies that deliver us to those experiences? So it completely flips from hierarchical, tops-down, dogmatically driven religiosity to grassroots, bottom-up, experientially driven, crowdsourced belief and belonging. So that's the project. And that would lead us to an Eleusinian Gnostic revival, right? Where we can go past the immature notion of the pre-tragic. It's all going to work out. We have the courage and the well-being to face the tragic. Man, doesn't feel like any of this is going to work out. And we can step into the initiate's perspective of the post-tragic. of what Gandhi called satyagraha, right? I understand that ultimately it does work out. Maybe not for me, maybe not for my children, but for my children's children. Because this is it. How do we get to the post-tragic? We have to die before we die. And Goethe, he's slinging lots of dank memes. He's got this one. Until you know this deep secret, die and become, you will be a stranger on this dark earth. Now that's some pretty gangster-ass shit to say to somebody before you cap them, right? But what does that actually mean, right? Because this notion is, we are all cosmic orphans. We were all born into this world the first time, more or less by accident, unless you have a belief system that suggests otherwise. Our two parents got together, bumped uglies, swapped gametes, and whoops, here we are. Evolution is amoral. And at some point from that womb experience, we get pushed out into the world, and it's cold and harsh and hard and unfair. We experience what Hobbes said, right? It's nasty, brutish, and short. We understand what Tennyson said, it's red in tooth and claw, and we say, fuck this, I didn't sign up for this, I want out, I want up, I want away, I want numb. We seek food, we seek sex, we seek shopping, we seek doom strolling, we seek spiritual bypassing, we do whatever we can because we don't want this. We didn't ask for it. Unless until we die before we die. This is the story of Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. She has to leave Kansas to realize, in fact, there's no place like home. It's Ebenezer Scrooge who has to see his future before saying, Merry Christmas and bless us each and every one. It's Jimmy Stewart in A Wonderful Life. It's V for Vendetta, right? If you guys have seen that one as well. It's the classic story that I have to have it all on the line to appreciate it and show back up, knowing that none of us get out of here alive. Accepting that we're all dead men and women walking, and choosing to sing our song anyway. So that's the potential power of that Gnostic, die before we die, initiatory experience. I'm going to bang through this one, but this is arguably that story in a nutshell. Right? This is what it looks like. So we're all born, we all die, and we all live our lives. And along the way, bad shit happens. Adverse childhood events, adverse life events, divorces, death, illnesses, bankruptcy, war. That's it. That's the road we all have to hoe. But if we're lucky, we might have a peak experience, we might have a breakthrough. And at first, it might just be your first love. It might be seeing shooting stars. It might be nature awe. It might be your first rock and roll concert where you were fumbling for a lighter for the encore. It's like, fuck yes. Right? That's just one. Then we have another. It might have been different methods, different means. By the time we have a third, we can start connecting that line and start spotting a trend. And that's arguably our mythic life. And if we're fortunate, this is Anne Shulgin's point, is there's often that deep sense of remembering that comes up in those experiences. We have a sense that we've been here before. We have a sense that there's a thread that we're picking back up. Right? This is what in Greek anamnesis is the forgetting of the forgetting. It's how we begin to remember. Right? And if we live this, right, there's real perils here. The first is we have those big experiences and want to spiritually bypass. We're like, oh, this is the new me. I'm going to start wearing scoop neck t-shirts and mala beads. I'm going to dress like Burning Man on Wednesdays. Right? Not so fast, cupcake. Or, this is true with all the Instagram Insta-shamans who are like spiritual materialism. They're like, I think I'm going to borrow some of this, smuggle it back, and flog it to the muggles. You know? Right? I can make it bang. I can do a whole new lifestyle. But if we stick with this, and instead of escaping or commodifying, what if we can lift our biographic life up? And what if we can bend our mythic life down? And what if we can meet and braid them instead of just death? It becomes rebirth. This is how we die before we die, and we become twice born. We become anthropos. Right? And that's the invitation. So, if you're curious, I wrote about this in my last book. I ran it past the Harvard anthropologist Wade Davis, as well as the neuroscientist David Eagleman and Andrew Huberman at Stanford. They're just kind of friends and colleagues. So I was like, is this track for you guys? And I think that this is the first, at least effort, to map the neurophysiology of the death rebirth experience in Western scientific language. So this is just a quick little recipe. In fact, I'll tell you what, I'll just bang through it, and you guys can take a picture, and we can move on. But it's kind of fun. Interestingly, this tends to, the key is the brainstem reset and delta wave EEG. So it's basically an engineered near-death experience for MD. And it seems to have a strong correlation with breathwork, gas-assisted breathwork, ketamine, nitrous oxide, 5-MeO, DMT, orgasm, pain, pleasure, basically just a neurophysiological reboot. And this tends to produce a profound, both, again, body-brain reset. It's like turning off a fritzing laptop, so you can have a pattern back up in homeostatic equilibrium. But it also tends to be incredibly information-rich, and that is obviously the source of inspiration of art and 1,000 other things. So once we've done that, what's the injunction, right? Stay awake, build stuff, and help out. Right? Remember what we forgot. Make art with it. And be of service to those less fortunate than us. So this is a Celtic cross, funnily enough, by the artist Gendelith. And for those of you that have been, feeling like, well, this is very dudish. This is still about Jesus, it's still about all these ascendant things. This is actually a gorgeous representation. This is pre-Christian. And the Celtic cross actually symbolizes Kairos and Chronos. Right? So Kairos is timeless, deep now. You experience it in psychedelic states, mystical states, flow states, etc. It is outside of Chronos, chronological clock time. And at the intersection is the beating, bleeding heart, the rosy crucian, the rosy cross of Christ consciousness. And that is arguably the blissfuck crucifixion. The blissfuck is all the fun shit. It's the hedonic engineering that delivers us to these states. The crucifixion is, oh my God, I am awake and I am aware of it all. And it hurts. But I'm not going to flinch. I'm not going to say no to this. I'm not going to bypass it. I am going to hang here and bear witness. And so that is the invitation for us. Because this notion of Christ consciousness isn't actually even just Western. In fact, for me at least, the metaphors, the allusions, the references to this, I have found have actually all been explicitly not Christian. Right? I'm sure most of us are familiar with the Japanese art kintsugi. That's that idea of when a vase or a pot breaks, you glue it back together with golden glue. It's beautiful. Right? That's Japanese. You've got Leonard Cohen, the Zen Jew. Right? There's that beautiful line in his poem anthem, there is a crack in everything. It's where the light gets in. It's where the light gets in. Pema Chodron, Tibetan Buddhist, right? Talking about to be alive is to be continually thrown out of the nest. Right? It means to die again and again. The Chinese have a phrase, shongzi, which literally means bathing with joy. It's how we mend and heal ourselves. So can we just embrace this notion of being knocked down and getting back up again? The notion of being broken open and persisting and making art and testifying to beauty is a human legacy. It is not the domain of any singular tradition. So, we can riff on this. This is what art historians call honky Jesus. He is exceptionally white and decidedly rare in the Levant. Like he's rarely been seen, but nonetheless, over 1 billion copies sold. This is the default relationship to that archetype. But let's play with some others. Many folks are familiar in this community with Andrew Jones, right? Has done some highly evocative versions of Yeshua and Yahweh. You put these on a big screen when you're tripping. They are psychoactive, right? This one is actually Alex Gray. This is his Cosmic Christ, if you prefer your archetypes a little freakier and geekier. And around him is the man at Burning Man. And for all the evangelical pearl clutching about Burning Man being a sort of pagan, godless festival, for anybody that's been to the final night where, like the iFox, they burn it down, you're like, oh shit, this is popping off, and this is quite something. Now, the screen, let's see, can you guys see this? Yeah. I'll read this to you. This is I was asked to write the foreword to a big, beautiful coffee table book by a London photographer called Dust to Dawn, all about burning men. And so I wrote this little bit. On the night the man burns, everything changes. We've spent the whole week admiring him as we paddle past, guided by his light. But on the night he is to die, we grow impatient with him and with ourselves. The gathering horde circles around him, tens of thousands strong. The flames lick his thighs as he slowly raises up his arms in supplication. We thirst for his destruction. You can practically hear the cries, "Bring us Barabbas." He dies so well, it almost makes you want to live a little better. He is the sacrificial king, Osiris, Dionysus, John, Barleycorn, and the Nazarene, rolled into one. Mankind, Goethe observed, has always crucified and burned. Our man is just the latest variation on that ancient theme. And for folks who prefer a little bit more integration, Amanda Sage, another very talented visionary artist, has created this one, Vitruvian human, right? And the sacred hermaphrodite, or androgyne, balancing masculine and feminine. If anybody's curious about taking a follow-up or a deeper dive into this is one of my idols and mentors in this entire space, Elaine Pagels. She is at Princeton. She won the National Book Award for her seminal translation of the Gnostic Gospels, the Nag Hammadi Scrolls. And she has just come out with this book 10 days ago. This is probably her last serious piece of scholarship, and it's fundamentally a riff on the Jesus meme. Right? Was Jesus the Son of God sent here to die for our sins? Was he a man who became enlightened? Was he a dude who didn't? Was he a mashup of Middle Eastern and Near Eastern solar cults and mystery schools? Was he an initiate's esoteric constructions and just an allegory? Was he ever even here at all? I think it's fair to say we'll never get to the bottom of that, but can we reflect on it as if he is the scintillating hyperobject that he probably is? And I think the Hebrews have a great thing on this. The Hebrews, unlike the fundamentalist Christians who say you have to buy the whole fish story or you don't get to belong, what do the Hebrews have? They have the Ark of the Covenant and the Holy of Holies and you never open it. You have the burning bush. And what do we do with the burning bush that is always on fire and never consumed? You just let it burn. So can we relate to the Jesus meme that has shaped 2,000 years of human consciousness and culture as that? A scintillating hyperobject, right, versus a singular collapse. And this one's also beautiful, right? Who's Mary? Which Mary? There's a whole lot of Marys in the Bible, a suspicious number of Marys. Right? And even this one, right, the notion of she was the virgin, she was the mother, no she wasn't. That was like 6th century Pope Gregory slung that shit together. Earlier stories actually think that that Mary was impregnated by a Roman centurion named Pantera. He was a bastard child. The first gospel, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, it's Mark's first. His gospel is sparse. Matthew and John do all sorts of backpedaling to cover up the stories and deal with the controversies. And John is the mystic one who's like Jesus Christ, divine Son, all these kind of things. So it goes from far more reasonable, the closer they were to the actual person, and to far more crazy. Mary Magdalene, right, is actually Mary of Magdala. She was Jesus' patron by most assessments. She was not the prostitute. It's not until the 6th century that 2 pages later in the Bible there's a notion of the fallen woman that gets glommed on to Mary of Magdala. So you undo that and you're like, holy shit. Take a look at these 3 images. On the left we have the Black Madonna of Poland. In the center we have the Corn Mother, a version of Guadalupe Hidalgo in the Western Hemisphere, who took on all the iconography, the corn and all of the things of the indigenous corn mothers and rolled that into Guadalupe Hidalgo iconography. And the right-hand one, the Black Madonna of Spain. This connects us to Kali. This connects us to a whole thing. So you're like, okay, what's the Mary mean? It's maiden, mother, crone, lover. And we suddenly have this profound possibility to reinstantiate, right, a reference. I'm getting an updated 5 minutes, and I'll stick to that one. All right. So for those of you that haven't brushed up on your Latin lately, this is just, Father, Pater, Filius, Son, Spiritus Sanctus, Holy Spirit. Non-est, isn't, so they're not the same as each other. And if you look at the center, est is God. And if you ever went to Sunday schools, or religious schools, you're like, what's that about? And they do backbends to justify this totally contorted thing. But actually, what if we flip the script, and instead of having patriarchal father at the top, right, we actually undo it? Because here's the fascinating thing. In Hebrew and Aramaic, the first description of the Holy Spirit is ruach, and it's feminine. You get to Greek, and it's pneuma, it's neutral, neutered, and then it becomes spiritus in Latin, and it's masculine. So this isn't an act of New Age wish fulfillment about honoring the goddess. This is just fucking accurate scholarship to rewind the clock to what actually was. So we can play with the Jesus and Mary meme and take a look at this one. Sidebar, by the way. I asked ChatGPT for a prior article I was writing last week about the techno-theo-fascists to draw for me, and because Elon had said we're summoning the AI demon. So I'm like, all right, give me a digital AI Lucifer. Scary as fuck, right? Beady eyes. He was rocking it, like computer code all over his body. Instantly. I asked him to build that. It took me an hour of arguing with ChatGPT to create that trinity. He's like, I am sorry, that's religious. I'm not allowed to do it. Are you talking? You'll summon the AI demon in 30 seconds. And I can't get a mother, father, child out of you. And what's so beautiful about this, right, is it's the same iconography. That is Apollo and Artemis, the twins. Right? This is Dionysus the babe. Right? We go to Nietzsche, right? Our Apollonian elements of ration, logic, reason, against our Dionysian impulses, mediated by what? Mediated by the sacred feminine. So just in this image alone, we have completely rewoven the Western mysteries. And it's not, again, by 21st century postmodern wish fulfillment. Right? It is by psychoarchaeology and dusting off what always and already was. All right, this is it. Home stretch. So here's where we are. This is an opportunity, right? To think about what does Christ consciousness look like in action. And this is, to me, one of the best expressions of it I've heard. Rex Mundi, the sovereign of the world, is a human being who assumes in a specific and dedicated way the wound of the world. Through this embodiment, they become the wounded healer of Grail lore, whose wound is born for the world. Through their glorious act of crucifixion and transfiguration upon the cross of this gnosis, which has become their bodhisattva vow, they heal others who touch their wounds of light. What sets them free? They're becoming, with complete presence, the gnosis that all wounds are only love, longing to be illumined in the heart. So for a broken and wounded world, and for a humanity that is hurting profoundly, can we accept and embrace this unification of the East and West, right? That upon the cross of this gnosis that has become this bodhisattva vow, can we initiate ourselves and each other? And can we walk each other home? Because we find ourselves at this crossroads, in this moment, on this Easter weekend. And we have a choice. It can be rational mysticism, the music of the spheres, the flash insights of the lucis, Christian charity and mercy of the Sermon on the Mount, rational mysticism, or national mysticism. If we don't fill this void in meaning, other people are, with less care and less compassion for the least of our brothers and sisters, and for this God we call home. So it's time to put down our nets and be fishers of men. It's time to put down our phone and show up for each other. And I'd like to leave you with a beautiful story. I didn't even think of this until like yesterday. But this actually came when I was talking with Rick Oliver, interviewing him for this last book, where I was telling a crazy story, if you haven't heard of it. Him dosing a bunch of monks with MDMA back in like 1985 in Big Sur. So a hoop of a tale. And he was just like, oh yeah, by the way, did you know that the Good Friday experiment, right, at Harvard, the famous one in 1962, actually Howard Thurman, right, this black mystic who was the complete inspiration for Martin Luther King and the entire civil rights movement, was actually the pastor that day. And I have audio. And I was like, are you kidding me? And I was ending this book just talking about Howard Thurman, his followers, because he had gone to India in the 1930s. He had met with Gandhi. Gandhi had the whole notion of Satyagraha, peaceful nonviolence. He had come back to the United States and like, all right, well, that's not going to swing in the South. We've got to sex this up a little bit. So we're going to call it soul force. MLK uses it in 1963 as I Have a Dream speech. And we can meet physical force with the majestic heights of soul force. Right? That whole thing comes from Howard Thurman. And it turns out, and by the way, that is the stained glass in Marsh Chapel in Boston, that they were all those triple mystics. They were doing that during that Good Friday experiment. So I will leave you with this. In one of those grace notes of history, Howard Thurman also delivered the sermon at the famous 1962 Good Friday experiment at Harvard Divinity School. Most accounts of that service focus on the headlines. Seminarians were given the psychedelic psilocybin, and many of them had profound mystical experiences that day. But virtually nowhere can you find accounts of what they were thinking about, sitting in Marsh Chapel, watching the sunlight stream through its rose-petal stained glass windows. Everyone is familiar with the musical cadence of the Baptist preacher tradition. Martin Luther King epitomized it. Barack Obama wrote his rhythms into the White House. Thurman sounded nothing like that. His voice was a rumbling baritone. His cadence was irregular and marked with as much silence as sound. In the closing minutes of an hour-long Good Friday sermon, in a chapel of tripping mystics, he told the story of hearing an anguished voice cry out, "Forgiveness. I went out and searched and found a man in the throes of crucifixion. I said, I will take you down. I tried to take the nails out of his feet, but he said, let them be, for I cannot be taken down until every man and every woman and every child will come together to take me down. I said, I cannot stand to hear you cry. What can I do? He said, go about the world. Tell everyone you meet that there's a man on the cross. A man on the cross. Tell everybody that you meet. That man on the cross is Anthropos. That cross lies at the intersection of Kairos and Chronos. A couple of thousand years ago, his realization was rare and remarkable. Today, it's required of all of us. It's this recognition of our divinity and our mortality that delivers us to our full humanity. Every man, woman, and child, every homegrown human. Take out the nails, remove the thorns, forgive ourselves, and each other. Not to usher in the second coming, but to bring about the ultimate coming. It's time to take him down. It's time for us to step up. Tell everyone. Tell everyone. Thank you very much.